Welcome to Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church. Our service today is called Healing UUs into a New World. Good morning, everybody. I am Ann Noonan, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. This morning's service is hosted by the Worship Committee, and Ginger, Lazarus, and I are sharing hosting duties. And we're so glad to see all of you here this morning. To learn more about our church and our values, please visit our website at melroseuu.org. On our welcome page, you can find a link to our digital guest book, and Ginger will share that link in the chat now. Everybody, please feel free to use that chat now and say hello and greet one another. And we would also love you to stay afterward for our virtual coffee hour. And now I have a special announcement from a member of our choir, Randall Gromitstein. Randall, if you can unmute, Josh will spotlight you.
All right, now I don't see myself at all, but this is Vivian Montgomery's last Sunday with us as our interim choir director and organist. And you had a chance to appreciate her incredible skills as an organist, or I think she was playing a harpsichord on the prelude this morning. She has brought amazing gifts to our church, and the choir has thoroughly enjoyed working with her. Vivian is always enthusiastic. She is always a problem solver. You can imagine some of the technical challenges that we have faced this church year, trying to have a choir over Zoom. And Vivian gives generously of her time and her many talents. And perhaps the most important one is making us all feel like we contribute. Thank you very much, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Randall. And I echo everything that you said. Well, folks, it is 2020, and that means that we have to be ready for everything. So unless somebody in the control room jumps in and restores my breathing, I have to tell you that we have not yet located our guest minister in the Zoom room. So I think that's worth a collective breath in and breath out.
I'm here.
Kia is here.
Yes.
Kia, I love you more than I loved you yesterday. Thank you.
I realized we didn't actually get a link to it. And so I'm like, oh, I guess we need to use the one on your website. So I am just waiting for Ryle to do that, because he again, he didn't have it. I just sent you the link on
I don't have anywhere.
Messenger, not Messenger, Google. Sorry, guys, technology's fun.
Anywhere.
1 second.
We trust you. Thank you.
You're muted, Kia.
I believe Kia is intentionally muted while we gather the right things together. So what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to go ahead with my introduction of Kia. I have the great pleasure to introduce Kia and Ryle to you. Kia Bordner uses the pronouns she, her, hers, and they, them, theirs. She is the granddaughter of Juan Crisostomo Renteria of the Tigua people of Isleta del Sur, Maria Teresa Baca, whose nation has been lost to the generations, the Monteverdis of the Yaqui peoples, and the Mayers of Germany. Kia is the mother of 3 daughters, Elizabeth, Sarah, and Julia, and a son, Ryle, who is our guest musician today. She also sits on the Council of the Ministers of Color chapter of the UU Ministerial Association and is a member of the Pacific Southwest District Board. Her home congregation is the First UU of San Diego, where she is currently a worship associate and deeply involved in family ministry and the current lead of their Journey Together Wholeness Core team. And now is the time for all of us to scroll through, put ourselves on gallery view, and click around and see who has joined us this morning. Thank you for making the time to be here. And now I believe we are ready to turn things over to Kia and give her a great big welcome. Josh, if that is the case, please spotlight her.
We got it. Okay. Good morning. We are on West Coast time, so it's just a little early here. Our introit this morning is a story of perseverance. After I learned about Joseph Shabalala, his words for this song, "Be Still My Heart, Even Here I Am Home," sounded like a song about trying to calm his broken heart in a resignation of the possibility he would never return home. This is about accepting that and moving forward.
Yes.
This morning's call to worship, the promise and the practice litany, the promise that binds, is by the Reverend Viola Abbott.
We are a covenantal people, and promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should have been enough to bind us together in love.
Many hearts have been and often continue to be broken time and again.
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should have been enough to bind us together in love.
The names of many of those of us who helped to make this denomination great were erased, their existence forgotten.
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should have been enough to bind us together in love.
The pulpits and pews, which should have been warm and welcoming, were instead sometimes cold and unforgiving.
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should be enough to bind us together in love.
People who were considered pillars in their communities were sometimes considered pariahs within the walls of our congregations.
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should be enough to bind us in love.
Many of us straddle two worlds, one of filiation and one of faith.
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should be enough to bind us together in love.
Our beauty is that we are all different and yet not different from one another. None of us should be considered exceptions, nor should we be subjected to baseless assumptions.
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, should be enough to bring us together in love.
The future of this faith is reliant on and belongs to all who embrace religious liberalism. Let us never forget that
We are a covenantal people, and the promise of our faith, which was enough to bring us together, is enough to bind us together in love.
Thank you, Kia and Ryle. And now, along with You Use Everywhere, I light this symbol of our faith, the flaming chalice. Our chalice reading today is from Reverend Fulgence Naji Jamana. In 2002, Reverend Fulgence founded the Unitarian Universalist Church of Burundi in East Africa. In 2015, during political unrest, he was detained by the government for suspected support of the opposition. Thanks to an international letter writing campaign, Reverend Fulgence was freed. He now lives and preaches in Canada. And this is his reading. When strangers meet, endless possibilities emerge, new experiences, new ways of understanding, and new ways of taking action. When strangers meet, each pays special attention to the other. Each is called to serve something larger than the self. Today, this morning, we light this chalice for openness, for willingness to grow, for rich curiosity, and for common purpose.
Thank you, Anne. And this morning we're going to do something a little bit different. We want to name and honor the Indigenous people and ancestors whose lands we all currently occupy uninvited. So there will be a link in the chat box, and you go to that link and you enter a zip code, and it will tell you which Indigenous nations' homelands that you are on. So my request this morning, since you are mostly all in the same zip code, is if you can possibly remember the zip code where you were born or grew up, spent most of your formative years, try to enter that in the website. And then once you've done that, we're going to enter into the chat the names of the indigenous nations. So I'm going to do that first so that I can show you. I've done this for where I grew up in Los Angeles, and I know that I lived on Chumash territory. And so in the chat, I'm going to put, oops. And I have been fortunate to have some Chumash friends. So I wrote out the whole thing, but everyone can just put in just the name of the people. There you go. And the Hadnase and the Peoria, the Santi and the Otri. Ryle could put in, he was born and grew up in San Diego, which is Kumeyaay land. So, and I did it for your church. And your church is on Pawtucket lands. I'm so excited. It seems that many people could remember, here's somebody from California area with Tongva. So excited. So many people could remember zip codes from when they were born or younger. That is awesome. So now we're going to have our opening hymn, which has a little introduction. So as we seek for openness and for willingness to grow, for rich curiosity and for a common purpose, so too did our Gula cousins of Georgia's South Seas. The Gula people maintained connections to their African cultural backgrounds. And one such connection shows up in this song, There Is More Love Somewhere, which is about their deep spiritual longing for common love, hope, peace, and joy. My friend and colleague, Dr. Glenn Thomas Rideout, the Director of Worship and Music at First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, cautions we Unitarian Universalists that when we inhabit the music, the forms of expression of people who live their lives along the margins of notice, we must notice that we have entered holy ground, a sacred space of learning, a sacred space of relationship. I invite us to bring that sense of holy with us as we listen to our next song.
There is more
Thank you so much, choir and Vivian. You so lift us in person, and it's been so beautiful to see how you lift us in this weird virtual world that we're in. So now let us join together in the words of our covenant, followed by the song of aspiration. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God.
And now it is time for our story, our time for all ages. So please, folks, gather around your device. And today it's interactive. We are going to be telling a story that is called Building a New Story. And so it's Mad Libs. I'm sure that many of you remember Mad Libs. So Ryle is going to ask you for a word, a specific type of a word, and you're going to enter it into the chat. And then when he's all done collecting all the words to fill in all the blanks, he's going to bring it to me, and then I'm going to tell you the story you helped us to create. So Ryle, take it away.
Alrighty. So how this will work is that you will put the word that I'm describing in the chat, and just the first one I see, I will put. So our first word is for a small animal. So let's see.
We got a hamster there. I like how there was a couple different voles. All right, so next one, Ryle.
Oh, okay. Our second word is for a color.
Whoa, so fast. I saw magenta. Let's go with magenta.
Okay, then. The third word is now going to be a plural vegetable. Any vegetable. I saw cucumber, egg. Let's do eggplant.
Eggplant. All right.
Our fourth word is going to be a fruit. Persimmon.
Okay. Hey, we have some persimmons right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, our fifth word is going to be baked. Any baked goods. So, I saw a pie.
Are we going with pie?
Yes.
All right, I like pie. Okay.
Our next word is going to be a liquid. I saw water.
Okay.
The next one is going to be a little interesting. It is a 60s folk song.
I know you all know some of those.
Let's see. If I had a hammer.
Okay. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. We're almost done.
Yeah, we were about over halfway there. Our next type of word is a type of flower. Rose. Okay.
Oops.
The next one will be one of the five senses. Cease taste a lot.
Taste. Okay.
Now, the next one will be a type of bird. Oh, it's a lot. I saw a robin.
Okay.
Very nice. Our next one is type of bean.
A bean, like, rice and beans.
I see kidney bean.
Okay.
And our final word, actually, it will be a number. Our final number is any number less than 10. Oh, geez. 6.
6. Okay. So I think I managed to capture all those words, Ryle. So you don't have to come in this direction. Okay. So, well, actually, you know what? Okay. If you can, while I start the story, just because that would help. So Ryle's going to come from one part of the house, but I'm going to start the story while he is doing that. So once upon a time, long, long ago, and still yet to come. In the early spring, a young hamster named Magenta was intently working in their community's garden. Their people depended on crops of eggplants, persimmons, and pie to get them through the long, harsh winter. Magenta had to go down to the nearby stream to bring back water to feed the seedlings and young plants. On the way, they began to sing "If I Had a Hammer," one of their community's sacred songs. As they made their way through the roses, which grew wild at the edge of their community's dwellings, just before the settled area gave way to the untouched land, Magenta tasted a soft crying. They began searching for the source. Under a rose bush, they found a robin whose wing was hanging limply at its side. "Don't be afraid. I mean you no harm. My name is Magenta. How can I help you?" The robin replied, "I don't know what happened. One moment I was flying along just as well as can be when suddenly something knocked me off course and swoosh, down I came. It really hurts." Magenta crawled in close to examine the wing as gently as possible. "Oh, it looks like it's been dislocated from your fall. If you trust me, I can help. It's going to hurt for a bit, but then it'll be set right. Please do whatever you can to help. I must get back home. I was bringing kidney beans to feed my people." The robin tilted its head to the side where Magenta noticed a sack with some ripe kidney beans, and many more of the beans had fallen underneath the roses. "Okay, I'm going to count to 6, and then I'm going to pull your wing back into place. Are you ready?" Magenta asked. The robin nodded, closed their eyes, and began to take long, slow, deep breaths in anticipation. Magenta counted clearly and calmly, then pulled quickly. The robin held its breath for a moment, and Magenta was worried that they had passed out from the pain. But just then, the robin exhaled and opened their eyes. They tentatively stretched out their wing and gently lifted it up. When it didn't hurt, they tried flapping slowly. Their eyes grew wide with joy and excitement. "Oh, thank you, Magenta, most kind hamster. You have healed me." "I was glad I was here," Magenta said. "Let me help you gather your kidney beans." Together, they refilled the robin's sack of kidney beans, and then the robin saluted and took flight to take the harvest to their people. And now you have a tale.
Hello. I am Ginger Lazarus. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Thank you for the story, by the way. That was magical. I am a member of the worship committee, and I'll open the prayer and meditation portion of the service this morning. Every Sunday in our worship, we set aside time for prayer and meditation, including some time for shared silence. Please now settle into your chair and breathe. Together, we'll share in our centering song and then in a few moments of quiet time where you can connect in your own way with your innermost thoughts. Our theme for November is healing, and our centering song will be our choir singing the spiritual, "It Is Well." Josh will share that now. And now we'll share a few moments of silence. Thank you. Every week, we share with one another the personal milestones of our lives, the joys and sorrows that mark our days, so that we might know one another more deeply and share our life's journeys. If you have a sorrow to share with us today, Please type it in the chat box now and I will read them aloud. Let me know if I miss one. From Kia, those who have lost their lives to COVID-19, our trans siblings who have lost their lives to violence, our indigenous sisters who have gone missing or been murdered, our Black family who have lost their lives to Black racism, for all those who have lost their lives to oppressive systems. From Paul R., in memory of my dad who passed away this week. From John R., a remembrance of Chuck Schacht who died of COVID. From Florence, a candle of love and support for my Uncle John, who is having brain surgery on Tuesday so that he may live more comfortably with Parkinson's disease. From Damien, sorrow to my dear friend Mary Bell, RN, COVID. Let us pause now and breathe, holding the sorrows of this community, those spoken and unspoken, in deep reverence. May those who are suffering this week know that we are with them, that we hold them in compassion and care. If they say the word, we will give our help, and we send our wishes and prayers for strength and healing. I now light a candle as a beacon of care for all the sorrows spoken and unspoken today. And now I ask for all the joys you'd like to share. Tap them into the chat box and I will read them aloud. Candle of dew gratitude for Vivian from Liz. I know firsthand the challenges of music over Zoom, and I'm so grateful to you, Vivian, for your skills, passion, and creativity. From Kia, my husband James, Ryle and Brian, my food ministry, the children of my extended chosen family. From Florence, a candle of joy for our dog Evie, who's turning 1 year old today. From Harry and Jennifer, for my stepbrother and his wife, who this week adopted a baby boy born on Tuesday. They are spending time with him in Texas this week, where he was born. From Mary, a candle of joy for cats. From Brian, one of my daughters is home for a few weeks. From Cheryl, today is Lee's brother's Ed 69th birthday. From Barbara, candle of joy, Emma being home from her first semester at college. From Liz, my annual candle, 5 years since surviving encephalitis and meningitis. From Beth, being with my son David. Candle of joy from Michelle, a candle of joy for the memory and legacy of my grandma Doris Cobb, who produced many wonderful Thanksgivings with love. Thank you. By speaking these joys aloud, you connect us to happiness and grace. We celebrate with you. I now light one more candle to shine out our joy for all the blessings shared here this morning. Now to Kia.
Thank you for sharing your joys and sorrows today. Please join me now in the spirit of prayer. This is a lamentation of the people. Breathe. Listen. Breathe. Did you hear the lamentation of the people? of the people whose ancestral lands have been taken, of the people taken from their motherlands. Breathe. Listen, really listen. This isn't the world we have always lived in, but it is the world in which we struggle now, in which our children are being oppressed. Genocide, slavery, doctrine of discovery, apartheid, Indian removal, Jim Crow, separate but equal, police brutality, legal systems of institutionalized murder. Breathe. Listen. Breathe. Where do we hear comfort being offered? Where do we hear voices raised in solidarity with us, your Black, Indigenous, people of color family? Where do we hear hope? Where do the people on the margins find the comfort? Breathe and listen, really listen. Where are those bending the arc toward justice for historical harms done, for generational trauma inflicted, for current damage being wrought? Who is accompanying us along a shared journey, hopefully toward wholeness and holiness? Breathe. Breathe because you can. Who is making space for our openness? Who is willing for our children to grow? Who praises our rich curiosity? Who is fighting for our common purpose? Where is that somewhere with more love for Black children? Where is that somewhere with more hope for Indigenous women? Where is that somewhere with more peace for those on the margins? Where is that somewhere with more joy? How can we all heal us into a new world that holds all of that for everyone? Breathe. Breathe with the earth. Breathe. And listen as we try to breathe life into a new world for all.
Now is the time for the offertory, the moment in the service when we pass the plate virtually. If you are moved by our worship this morning, I invite you to donate using the yellow button in the top right corner of our homepage at melroseuu.org. Be sure to mark your gift as pledge or plate, and remember that half our donations this month go to Bread of Life, which feeds the hungry in nearby Malden.
Ryle will now sing Hine Matav. To heal ourselves into this world, we must behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity.
הנה מה טבו מנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טבו מנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טב, שבת אחים גם יחד. טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טבו מנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טבו מנעים, שבת אחים גם יחד.
Today's reading is a prayer that I offer for all who live in the liminal spaces between what was and what will be, a prayer for all who journey between worlds in their intersectionality, a prayer for those who are working through fear and anger toward understanding and love, a prayer for those who are healing themselves to become whole, a prayer for our connected survival. This prayer is my arrangement of Audre Lorde's A Litany for Survival. The words are on slides, so you can follow along. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone, for those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now, seeking a now that can breed futures, seeking a now that can breed futures. For those of us seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, imprinted with fear, imprinted with fear like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, for by this weapon, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us, to silence us, to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, for all of us, we were never meant to survive. For those of us who live at the shoreline and when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. And when the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. For those of us who were imprinted with fear when our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. For those of us seeking a now that can breed futures, when we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. For those of us who live at the shoreline, imprinted with fear, seeking a now that can breed futures, and when we speak, we are afraid. Our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. Whew. So thank you again for joining us this morning. I start my message to you with a saying, Nakute Nakute Takaman. That means long, long ago, therefore it's so. Kind of like once upon a time. It comes from my grandfather's people. Once the world was perfect, and we were happy in that world. Then we took it for granted. Discontent began, a small rumble in the earthly mind. Then doubt pushed through with its spiked head. And once doubt ruptured the web, all manner of demon thought jumped through. We destroyed the world we had been given for inspiration, for life. Each stone of jealousy, each stone of fear, greed, envy, and hatred put out the light. And no one was without a stone in his or her hand. There we were, right back where we had started. We were bumping into each other in the dark, and now we had no place to live since we didn't know how to live with each other. Then one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket, and a spark of kindness made a light, and that light made an opening in darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder, and a Wind Clan person climbed out first into the next world, and then the other clans, the children of those clans, their children, and their children, all the way through time to now, into this morning's light, to you. Once the world was perfect, from Conflict Resolutions for Holy Beings by Muscovy Creek Nation member Joy Harjo, the first Indigenous National Poet Laureate since the position was created in 1985. There have been 22 non-Indigenous people chosen before. In this sacred time and space of Sunday morning worships, we Unitarian Universalists like to share stories from many traditions, from many people. And because stories are medicine, we need to be responsible with how we use them. Stories share truths, honor ancestors, and shape the future. They are magic, transforming both teller and listener. They are created to answer questions and should in themselves create new questions. Once a story is birthed, it exists in the universe forever. Once a story is received, it should inform our choices and our lives. Once a story is felt, the kernel of it stays with us. To quote Cherokee, German, and Greek author and Native American academic Thomas King, the truth about stories is that that's all we are. Yet, for most of American history, Indigenous people and First Nation folk are just stories, and all too often just props in those stories, such as the mythological stories still being celebrated this coming Thursday. Let me offer a different story. In the time before Earth was created, there were two worlds. One was in the sky, and the sky people lived there. And the other was covered in water, and the water creatures lived there. It happened that a pregnant sky woman fell through a hole in the sky. Maybe she was pushed. Maybe she tripped. Maybe she jumped. Anyway about it, she fell from the sky. And a flock of birds, maybe the blue heron, maybe geese, maybe duck. Anyway about it, they caught her and they slowed her descent. They tried to carry her back up to the hole through which she had fallen, but she was so heavy with her pregnancy. So they set her down on the back of Great Turtle. But the back of Great Turtle was not large enough for her and her children who were coming. I say children because Sky Woman was pregnant with twins. So various animals tried diving deep down into the waters to find some soil, some mud, some earth, as it were. And maybe it was the water beetle. Maybe it was the toad. Maybe it was the muskrat. Anyway about it, some creature came back with just enough mud to spread on the back of Great Turtle, which expanded until it was all the land upon all which all the people would live. Turtle Island. In an acorn cap, this is the basics of the creation story for many North American nations. A creation story with people in relationship with the rest of nature and the universe, co-creators of existence as equally sacred and holy. From Ecofeminism and the Sacred, I share part of a story called Animal, Vegetable, and Mineral, The Sacred Connection, by poet and essayist Carol Lee Sanchez, a native New Mexican of Laguna Pueblo, Lakota, and Lebanese heritage. She wrote, while Euro-Westerners define sacred as set apart or dedicated to religious uses, hallowed as opposed to profane, American Indians make no such arbitrary decision. Most Euro-American or Euro-Western people tend to separate themselves from nature and to rank humans above. She goes on to say, Native Americans believe themselves to be an integral part of the natural world. And though white Euro-Westerners have created the most self-centered ideologies of any race on the planet, Native American philosophies say they are our relatives. It is our duty to show them how to walk in beauty with us. Indigenous people make no arbitrary decisions between what is sacred or holy and what is not. All is sacred, all is holy. You are all our relations. It is our duty to show you how to walk in beauty with us. This is our covenant with the Great Spirit. You are all my relations. It's my duty to show you how to walk in beauty with me. This is my covenant with the Great Spirit, the Creator, the universe. Saying the phrase, all my relations, affirms this belief that we are connected to all things outside ourselves, reminds us of our personal relationship and connection to the universe, to all things, which are all sacred, which are all holy. It reminds us of our covenant with all beings, as we hold that all are part of this Great Spirit. Now, in our story, Building a New Story, there was no second act when the robin came back to repay Magenta. Now, we, much like Magenta, don't even need to know the names of those we have helped heal. All we need to know is they are us, we are them, we are all holy, we are all one. Today, in honoring Native American and Alaska Native Heritage Month, and recognizing that it has now been 400 years since Turtle Island was invaded, the stories I offer to help us create medicine to heal the world may be hard to swallow or leave a harsh taste. Know that it is my intention for these stories to have impact. I ask that you sit with these feelings with any discomfort, for you too must be part of the creating. And consider that to honor means to regard with great respect and to fulfill an obligation. Consider that I have an obligation to honor my ancestors, my siblings, and my descendants, and an obligation to your ancestors, your siblings, and your descendants, to all of my relations. Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, Part 1, by Joy Harjo. Set conflict resolution ground rules. I am the holy being of my mother's prayer and my father's song. A quote from Norman Patrick Brown, a Diné poet and speaker. Recognize whose lands these are on which we stand. Ask the deer, the turtle, and the crane. Make sure the spirits of these lands are respected and treated with goodwill. The land is a being who remembers everything. You will have to answer to your children and their children and their children. The red shimmer of remembering will compel you up at night to walk the perimeter of truth for understanding. As I brushed my hair over the hotel sink to get ready, I heard, by listening, we will understand who we are. In this holy realm of words, do not parade pleased with yourself. You must speak in the language of justice. This morning, I asked you to try to recall the zip code where you're born or grew up to identify which Indigenous nations' lands you were born onto. I invite you further to learn the stories of those nations. Now, had I been visiting your community in person, a couple of things would have been different. One, every time I tell a story, I would actually have taken a bead out of a jar. And at the beginning, I would have greeted you all and let you take a bead so that you had part of today's story. But the other thing I would have done is I would have brought another story in the form of a pillar candle in a simple clear glass holder. And I would have entrusted you with a new ritual, one of lighting a candle to recall that the sacred space which you occupy was first the sacred space of the Pawtucket people. So in their honor and to remind yourself that this is their home, I light this sacred flame and I charge you, the people of the Melrose Unitarian Universalist Church, to be the stewards of such a ritual as long as you occupy that sacred and holy space. The prophecy of the seventh fire of the Ashwaubenon Nation is a story about healing us into a new world. It is time that the light-skinned race it is this time that the light-skinned race will be given a choice between two roads. One road will be green and lush and very inviting. The other road will be black and charred, and walking it will cut their feet. In the prophecy, the people decide to take neither road, but instead to turn back, to remember and reclaim the wisdom of those who came before them. If they choose the right road, then the seventh fire will light the eighth and final fire, an eternal fire of peace, love, brotherhood, and sisterhood. If the light-skinned race makes the wrong choice of the roads, then the destruction which they brought with them in coming to this country will come back at them and cause much suffering and death to all of Earth's people. This leads us into a story about making the right choices. It comes from the Reverend Adam Dyer, currently the lead minister at the First Parish in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On October 7th of last year, Adam wrote a declaration for 1620 atonement in a blog post he titled "A Failure of My Faith." I have now watched the date that marks 400 years since Africans were first displaced to this continent in bondage, come and go with no substantial acknowledgement by the Unitarian Universalist Association. Well, we rang bells. It's nice. I serve this denomination of one of all too few African American ministers, and this lack of action is yet another reminder that in many ways, this is not my faith. But I am not deterred. In fact, I am determined that because of this minimal action, I will not let the same thing happen next year with regard to marking 400 years since the start of the aggressive and premeditated displacement in 1620 of Native people from the place that we now call Massachusetts. I believe that the Unitarian Universalist Association and the United Church of Christ, as the modern day religious descendants of the Puritans who arrived here in 1620, must make a public acknowledgement of their role in initiating the devastation of Native people. Native people did not lay down without a fight, but they were ultimately repressed by the English colonizer, who had little or no interest in the original inhabitants continuing to survive according to their own traditions and customs, let alone thrive. I'm tired of accommodating white fragility around this history. I also know if these three powerful and supposedly liberal entities continue to tacitly accept the forced removal, enslavement, and genocide of the original inhabitants of this land as progress, we will never get to a place of true progress. We will never truly recognize or resolve the ongoing violence of the Atlantic slave trade or the troublingly persistent second-class status of women. In order to accomplish anything at all, we must begin at a beginning. New England talks a good game on liberal values, but talk is cheap, repentance is dear. It is time for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the descended religious bodies of the Puritans, the UUA and UCC, to pay up. He continues with his imagining of what a joint declaration from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the UCC, and the UUA, addressing their role in native displacement and murder might look like. Because, as he writes, it is my obligation to call that legacy to account if my faith is ever to live up to my standards of racial, social, and cultural equity. There can be no healing and no new world for all of us if we can't be accountable to each other and do the truly difficult work of dismantling oppressive systems and taking steps towards true reparation. Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings, Part 6. And use what you learn to resolve your own conflicts and to mediate others' conflicts. When we made it back home, back over those curved roads that wind through the city of peace, we stopped at the doorway of dusk as it opened to our homelands. We gave thanks for the story, for all parts of the story, because it was by the light of those challenges we knew ourselves. We asked for forgiveness. We laid down our burdens next to each other. It is my hope that through sharing these stories with you, my new people, I am co-creating the medicine we will all need to help us heal ourselves into a new world. In sharing these stories, I'm sharing a piece of my history, my present, and my future. A piece of our history, our present, our future. And for that to be a future, a healthy and healed one, filled with true stories which transform the world, we must be co-creators and co-nurturers of these tales. We must claim, proclaim, and come together in our holiness. You too must be part of the telling. So you have your story, your part to add to the medicine. Take these other stories. Take them in the form of medicine in your hearts. They are yours. As Thomas King says, do with them what you will. Tell them to friends, forget them. But don't say in the years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you had heard this story. You have heard it now. And as my grandfather's people, the Tigwa, say at the end of a story, Kakwexi, now you have a tale. Our closing hymn is We Will Rise Up by Joan Shenandoah, a member of the Wolf Clan of the Oneida Nation of the Haudenosaunee people of the Iroquois Confederacy. This song was the best indie single at the Native American Music Awards in 2019. And since hearing it, it has felt like it is an anthem for our times. And Joan has been gracious enough to let me use it in worships.
I am standing on the edge of wondering where to go. Love and hatred filled my being, torn in this world of woe. What happened to the love we knew and the way we cared back then? Prophecies are coming true, but this will not be the end. Oh no, this won't be the end. And in our darkest hour, we will not be afraid. When others lose their way, we will rise up. We will rise up. We will rise up and see the way.
Our benediction today is by the Reverend Elizabeth Nguyen. Our journey is to transform. As Unitarian Universalists, our journey is to transform the big and the small, to transform ourselves and to transform the world. Universalism means no one is outside of the circle of love and no one is disposable.
No one is outside the circle of love, and no one is disposable.
We stubbornly seek out the spark of the divine in each other, no matter what. Interdependence means none of us is truly free until we are all free, and our thriving is bound up in the earth's thriving.
None of us are truly free until we are all free.
We struggle for liberation from the violence of white supremacy, sexism, ableism, classism, and heterosexism. Our covenants mean we make promises to our communities to honor, love, and justice above all else.
We make promises to honor love and justice above all else.